Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning, everybody. I know we'll have more people coming in the next few minutes, but I think we'll get going. So thanks everyone for coming. I know I've said these words to you many times, some of you already, but it's so good to see people joining from all over the province and to see so many of our members who are joining us here today. I wanted to note that this meeting is being recorded and we'll share the recording for people who couldn't attend. And we'd appreciate it if you could keep your microphone muted during the presentation unless you have something to say. My name's Jocelyn Badley. I'm one of the TEL staff organizing this speaker series, and we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year at TEL, and we're holding a series of these events throughout 2022 to celebrate our anniversary. And we're featuring speakers who will bring their knowledge and a wide variety of perspectives to a series of conversations about the future. So it's our hope that these new approaches and perspectives will help you plan for the future at your own libraries and with your own staff, and for the library community in general, and for TAL as an organization too. I'm going to put a link for today's session evaluation in the chat right after I say these words, and I'll post it again towards the end of the session just so I don't forget. So please do fill out an evaluation, especially let us know if you have suggestions for other topics that you'd like us to cover, because we'll have a break in this series for the summer and then we'll be resuming in September. So we'll have a few more in the fall, and I would love to hear your suggestions if there are things you'd like for us to cover. Now I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of many peoples presently subject to treaties 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, namely the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Kainai, Piikani, and Siksika, the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina Nation, and the Métis people of Alberta. We're grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. Now I would like to introduce our speaker today, Sofie Hvitved. Sofie is a futurist, a senior advisor and head of media at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. She has a very diverse background in the media industry, and she now focuses on the intersection of media and technology. And she's joining us this morning from Copenhagen, where it's not the morning, it's the sort of supper time. So thank you so much for being here with us, Sofie. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Jocelyn. I'm really happy to be here. And I don't know if any of you looked into the chat, but there's a link and you might wonder, what is that? And that is something that I just attended last week here in Denmark called the People's Meeting, where we meet and we share knowledge with politicians, with all organizations, with CEOs, everybody who really has an agenda. And we did talk also a panel at the Institute on the future of philanthropy. So, you know, those are kind of the big issues going on there. So that was really interesting. Yeah, and thank you so much for inviting me to share our thoughts and my thoughts on where we're heading and where you might be heading as libraries, because that is what I have been focusing on in this presentation. And feel free to go in and ask questions during, just jump in, you know, hey, I don't understand this, could you please repeat? Or, you know, let's just do it in a nice dialogue. So yeah, so feel free to say something. I'm not sure that I can see you all, so I won't be able to, you know, see if you raise your hands, but maybe Jocelyn, you can also check inside the chat if there's something that I need to comment on or reply, or if there's somebody who would like to, oh, sorry.
For sure, I'd be happy to.
Perfect. So looking into the horizon, this one you see in the corner is the future user of a library, because that is an avatar. So you probably heard about the avatars before in some of the speaks, you know, this whole way that we represent ourselves in the virtual world. And it's like really interesting to see where that is heading, because we will not be representing ourselves necessarily the way that we are in the physical world. Not saying that the physical world is then more real than the virtual, but we really have to look into this new interception of the virtual and the physical worlds. So this is something I will touch a little bit upon later on. First, I'll just share with you a little video that I found earlier when doing research for this talk. And I hope it's not too loud, but then you can maybe just adjust your speakers a little bit.
Right, a scientist, a techie, an engineer, an artist, and a mathematician walk into a pub. Except it's not a pub, it's an oil rig, bristling with gardens in Weston-super-Mare. Okay, try this. You're on the moon, in Leicester, and someone turns to you and says, "Am I made of stars too?" And you say, "Yes, sweetheart, and so am I." You see where I'm going with this? Now close your eyes, tap the button, and your whole mind lights up like a Christmas tree, except nothing's really happening. But it must be, because you whoosh off into the solar system, and suddenly you can see it all. Life, history, the universe, what it is, better than that, what it could be. Unboxed, a celebration of all our creativity, happening across the UK in 2022. Find out more at unboxed2022.uk.
So I'm showing this because I stumbled upon it, and it has a lot of interesting aspects that are being shown at libraries throughout the UK. So it's happening right now, and it's like trying to make new experiences and unboxing creativity and using the libraries as space. And I think that's an interesting sort of role of the library, because that is what we're going to discuss today and look into. So the future role of the library, where is that at? And is it really books, or should it maybe be other things too, as it is already? I think I stumbled upon this as well on the Canadian Federation of Library Associations, saying that libraries have a core responsibility to safeguard and facilitate access to constitutionally protected expressions of knowledge, imagination, ideas, and opinion. And libraries provide, defend, and promote equitable access to the widest possible variety of expressive content and resist calls for censorship and the adoption of systems that deny or restrict access to resources. And I think that was a really beautiful thing. I mean, that's a really beautiful goal. And it's really interesting to see, well, what is a library then? It doesn't say that a library is a place where you can read a book. It doesn't say that a library, you know, a certain way that this has to be done. So I find that really interesting to look into. Before we get going, actually, I would like to involve you a little bit. If you have your phones, you can take them out, and or you can just go to sly.do and type in that number, the 4163445, or you can just scan the code with your normal normal camera on your phone, and then you'll go to a questionnaire. And I will just stop sharing, because then you will see this one. So if you can write the first word you associate with the future of libraries, and not that was you are already in there, yeah, exactly. And you are welcome to write more. I'm pretty sure you have more possibilities. And you just write the word that you associate with the future of libraries. Or the first two words, if you have more you'd like to share. That's really interesting. So sharing, confused, worry, potential. Can you see my screen as well? Can you see in the screen that the slide? Yeah, perfect. Funding, yeah, exactly. It's going to be interesting how it's going to be funded. Formats, technology, obviously, access, community. Really interesting words. And interesting to see, you know, how they intertwine, because they definitely go into the role as well of what the library should be, and putting that into perspective. And I can understand that there's a lot of, yeah, both confusion and uncertainty regarding this. There's uncertainty in almost every area that we look into, but obviously a library, a very traditional institution that is somehow has been built up upon the books, right? Is interesting to see, even though books are being digitalized and there are so many other things you can do at libraries, and they have so many different roles. Then when you digitalize everything suddenly, what is the role of the physical library? So we just take one more question here. Sorry. My goodness. Let me see. What is that? There you go. So the next one. I think my role as a librarian, I'm not sure if all of you are librarians, so I'm sorry. I don't know the different definitions that you have. but your role in the library then will change a lot in the next 10 years. It will be drastically, a bit, not really, or not, no, not at all. It will be the same. Yeah. So between drastically and a bit. Yeah, that's interesting. Also, it's a kind of a tricky question, right? Because what does it mean to change? I mean, and with the role, maybe the role will be the same, but in a different technological sort of surrounding, or in a different sort of with different tools. But I guess that has been the same for a long time already. But yeah, for sure, there are going to be interesting changes. I believe that as well in that role. Will there be as many physical libraries in 10 years as there are today? Yes, about the same. No, there will be more. Could be. No, there will be less. Or we will have we will not have physical libraries in 2030. This is interesting, right? So you definitely have a good belief that the physical libraries will still play a big role and be funded in 10 years from now. I think that's nice, and I hope so too. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what the role as well will be of that physical library, and it will probably not have the same role as it is now. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. It was just a little bit to see how you were looking at the situation, and especially now that you are sort of diving so much into the future. You can see my PowerPoint now, right? Yeah, perfect. All right. So today I'm going to take you through, I guess, about an hour of talking, and you can just, and we can also have time to do a good dialogue. So, you know, feel free to jump in whenever you'd like, and we can have a discussion on that. I have quite a few slides, but we can always jump through some of them and then move on to the next area. So feel free to jump in. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we see future studies. I know you already was talking to Bishop, who has the Teach the Future. And actually here in Copenhagen, we have just gotten a collaboration with Teach the Future that we actually launched at Folkemødet, the place that I was last week, where we were making a Teach the Future session with a school in the little island. So that was really nice, and we got some really good feedback on that. So you obviously, we know some of the same frameworks, but I'm going to talk a little bit about how we think about that, how we think about the future consumer that we call the liquid consumer. We're going to go into some trends, and they are technologically, you know, because there are technological trends, because they are really pushing the way that we are interacting and the way that we see information and how we share information and these sorts of things that are also important to the libraries. And then I'm going to dive into the future of trust a little bit in the end. So a quick intro of this institute that we have at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. We're actually the fourth, we're battling a little bit about this, whether we're the third or the fourth oldest institute for future studies, but we were one of the oldest. The first one was in 1967. And this was created, ours was created by the former OECD General Secretary, Torvald Christensen, who funded it as a non-profit futures think tank. So that is basically what we do at the Institute. And we try to work structured with foresight. My own role is, as Jocelyn mentioned a little bit, I'm head of media in there. I'm a senior advisor. So I have the luxury to really dive into the field of communication and media. So that's kind of my small little bubble where I'm in. But what happens with that is that it interferes with everything. It's something that is really affecting all kinds of places in society and all different companies as well. I'm also a member of the Danish Media Board. So we have public service in Denmark. We have a fund that we are giving money for different media so that they can be independent. And I'm the one, we are a little group of 7 who are deciding who to get that. And I just got that role this year, so I have it for 4 years now. And there's a lot of things happening in the Danish media industry, figuring out the future of media. So this is something that I'm very engaged in. And I'm also, my background is a master in media science, just so you know a little bit about where I come from. And also I've been working at the Danish broadcasting radio for broadcasting in long time. the national broadcaster. These are some of our, well, we say clients, they're sort of members or futures partners here. So as you can see, it's a very broad variety of clients that we work with and companies, but mainly bigger ones that are being involved in large projects where we look into scenarios, future scenarios, future trends, where we're heading, vision papers, like the vision for 2050, where would we like to be, how does society look, what kind of, what do the consumers look like, and stuff like that. And then I think you probably already know a lot about this, but it is not our goal to predict the future. So we have to just figure out a way to be prepared for what to come and be aware of these implications and this impact that it might bring. So this is what we try to do, to work structured like with this, so that we are prepared for the different futures. That's also why we're called the Institute for Futures Studies and not Future Studies, because there is no future. There are several futures, and we are both creating them as we go, and they're changing as we go. So it's impossible to really talk about one future. We work from this structure of the cone of possibilities, right? So we work a lot with these possible, plausible, probable, and mostly when we work with people, also the preferable future and the desired future. So when we look into the futures and we look into the different scenarios, we do not look at the preferable. Then we're not normative. We are just looking at what might happen if this and this happen. What are the biggest uncertainties? And from them, we create our scenarios. But when we start working with it and put it into strategy, obviously you have to have an idea of the preferred future and how you actually get there. And then you can start backcasting and figure out, okay, what steps do I have to take today in order to reach that future that we want to be in and that we want to help create. And that's a really nice way and framework that we think is regarding working with the future. This is one of the pictures that we often, do you know this one? Have you seen it before? Maybe some of you have. Oh, okay. So the interesting thing is here is what we thought the world would look like, right? In 1950, how would it look in 2020? And they got so many things right. You know, they have a little kind of a Skype place where you can sort of interact. You know, they have a microwave, they have the flat screen, and they have color TV. You know, they have a lot of really interesting technologies that they got right. But then, if I may ask you, can you see what's wrong in this picture? And the ones of you who know it, if not that there is just one answer, but does anybody want to chip in with an idea of what is not? And just turn on the mic, because I can't see you.
I think it's the idea of family that's changed significantly.
For sure. So the whole way that we are as society, so that we have the women are from home, the man is working, you know, the way that our roles are, the family roles, definitely, for sure, that's one of it. Any other good ideas?
In the chat, people have suggested the helicopter, the ironing and the laundry machine. Somehow we're in a future where we still have to do laundry. Smoking, which was what I noticed as well, and the formal table setting on the table.
I love that. Don't we still have that? Oh, not with that many. That's true. It's like, yeah, that's funny. I haven't noticed that before.
Also, someone says that there's only one cat, which seems suspicious. Maybe there should be more cats.
Somebody also told me like he has 3 wives. I was like, oh, I didn't see them as wives, but okay. That's maybe like a wishful, preferable future for some, but yeah, no, but I think this whole, exactly the whole idea of looking into what will society be like. And also there is sort of a body ideal that might not fit the future as well. They're very slim and very tall, so that they thought of, I guess that they might have been thinking that they'd be like a little bit alien. You know, we were so good in figuring out how to control our weight and look good, and they all look really nice, you know. So it's kind of not really the family that you will normally meet in 20, and that was also in 2020 actually. So in 2020, no, sorry, in 2000, it wasn't 2020, it was in 2000. And in 2000, we didn't have that flat screens, you know, so that we weren't really there. It's also really difficult to see when will things happen, you know, when, what is it actually that will change? When will we get that helicopter on our roof? You know, maybe we will eventually at one point. But the whole idea of not just looking at technology in a very isolated way, but be sure to have the whole sort of 360 vision on it, and see how will we as society move with this as well? How will we adapt to the technology? How will we use the technology? How will we be moved? As a part of a project a couple of years ago, we did another one, like how might life look in 50 years from now? You know, I think this is also very interesting to see how will we interact? How will family life be? You know, here we see an older woman giving, you know, getting a child, and maybe, you know, she can see the child in a 3D version, in a hologram, and it's probably also the dad who's there. He's in another place, you know, they're celebrating that they're having a baby. How will these things sort of impact our lives? How will this be? You know, what kind of future are we looking into? So these are some of the things that we are really working on at the Institute. So another little interaction. Do you know what this building is? Anybody? Okay, I can see there is something in the chat. Nope. All right, can you see it now? Yeah, anybody? Close? Nah. Library, not really. No, could be IKEA. Yeah, Jen, you hit it. It is the old Blockbuster building. And you all know the story of how Blockbuster went. And I think this is just a really good thing to always have in the back of the head, that you're never really, you don't have sort of the right to win. And I really think that it's a good thing to know, like, just because you are a library that has, it's extreme, the legacy that you bring with you is extreme, but do you have a right to win? I think it has to be earned. And this comes both for industries, but also for obviously companies and organizations. So even though that you're a market leader and that you think that you have it all set, then it is not okay to go and say, as Blockbuster did, that they did not see Netflix as any sort of, you know, competition, because they were so sure that they would keep on having a physical spot where they could be delivering their videos. So what can we learn from this? Sort of the future is not linear, you know, and sometimes you build things to last, but maybe you should build it to adapt. Do you know this bridge? Does anybody have an idea what this is? This is a bridge that was built by a Japanese company in Honduras, because they said they wanted a bridge that was just so, you know, not sustainable, but resistant, that it would never, you know, pass. 2 years later, when it was built, on the same year actually that it was built, a huge storm came to Honduras. All the rivers, 150 bridges around in Honduras and in South America were destroyed. This bridge remained because it was built to last. But after the storm, can you see where the river went? So it's, you know, sometimes it's not necessarily to be resistant and just be there. So this is a bridge that's still there, and it's called the Bridge to Nowhere. And I think that's an interesting sort of a picture on, you know, what is it actually we're building for, and how long should we stay where we are and be the ones that we are right now. Another interesting take on this that I saw just recently is Instagram. So Instagram is, as you know, one of the biggest players in the creator economy and in this whole idea of influencers and all that. They have a huge market share, but their head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, he just went out talking about giving up control of data ownership. This whole thing that we're seeing in the Web3 movement, with blockchain, with NFTs, with people getting more sort of control over their own data. And he said, and I think this is really clever, you know, the greatest risk a platform is facing is not competition, though competition is a huge risk, you know, if somebody else comes and do a better job than you, but it is that the world changes to make what you do irrelevant because you're not willing to lean in and change along with the world. And I think that is really interesting to see. So if he sees that people are actually, you know, starting to demanding things in a new way, getting more control over their own data, getting more control over their own knowledge and their way of communicating and what they create, then they have to support that. So he's very aware of that. He says he's not sure it's going to happen, but he is definitely considering that this is something that they will have to look into. And I don't know if you've been talking about the great unbundling before, but I think Amazon also being a book, well, not a library, but a bookshop early on, is interesting to see how they have sort of adapted in this great unbundling, figuring out where are the needs? How can we fulfill these needs? So they totally unbundle the way that they used to do things, and then they just start focusing on services and different things that are fulfilling different needs. And I think this is an interesting thing to look at, how the traditional ecosystem is rapidly changing. And we see that in the media industry, where I work a lot, that we are trying to figure out how is this going, and also, how are things being consolidated. Like Twitch is part of Amazon right now. You don't think of Twitch as Amazon, but it is. And they keep on buying new things in order to get bigger and bigger, obviously, and be more part of the ecosystem that they create. Normally, I look at this one. It's an American professor. And this is actually, I think it's almost in all my talks, because I think it's such a great way to illustrate that what we are looking into. This is an American professor. He calls himself a media cartographer. He's a little bit like smart, what do you say? But I think I love his idea, because this is a mapping of where the revenue is in the media industry, and in the media industry very broadly, as you can see. We have the gaming companies, we have Spotify, we have Snapchat and ByteDance and TikTok, all these things we have. But you can see there are some really huge players here that he calls the Death Stars, and some people call them black holes, because they eat up everything else in this sort of environment. And I think it's interesting to see, how do you navigate in this in your information flow, and where is the library? Where's the role of the library in this flow of information, in this flow of obviously a lot of this is entertainment, but a lot of this is knowledge as well. A lot of this is information as well. Could the library be inside some of these spaces? Where is the sort of, how is it positioned? So it's because, of course, it's the battle of the mind space, even though you have a very specific role to fulfill, but you still want that information that you have on the shelves or wherever you have it to reach the audience, right? Because else it will not be any value to anybody. So this is an interesting map that we always sort of look to in trying to understand the new complexity of the media landscape. Because we're seeing at this liquid consumer, the future consumer that we're talking about. We made a report. At the Institute, we do a lot of different reports and a lot of different magazines as well. And we made this report called Understanding the Future Consumer a couple of years ago, where we tried to figure out how can we actually understand them better, what's happening, what's going on. And what we found was that there's a constant sort of a little black book where we're looking at convenience and transformation, and whether it's for me or whether it's for the world. So sometimes we'd like to do something because we know it's better for the world, like let's say not fly somewhere and then take the train. But sometimes I want to go to a conference and I don't have that much time. So, I'd rather go fast. It has to be more seamless for me. And then I'll take the plane, and then I'll sort of tell myself that it's okay because the next day I'll eat vegetarian. So we constantly sort of put these ups and downs on trying to transform ourselves as people and trying to transform the world, but also doing it in a more and more seamless way. And this whole thing of removing friction is a really interesting debate, because friction is, I guess, for people, a very good thing, because when we are being moved out of our comfort zones and are being, pressured with friction, that's where we actually move as people and sort of develop. But right now we're seeing a move where we're sort of removing friction all the time. And this also makes it that people are not so loyal, they're not so sort of the way that they used to do, I guess. I don't know, do you have any sort of result on the average age of your users at the library? Could you share that? I don't know if you have it on top of your head. I don't know if you have it. Is it in the chat, or you're going to say it? I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea. But I talked, for instance. Sorry, Jocelyn, are you?
Someone said young families or seniors is my guess, but nobody has posted a. One person says we skew older, but they aren't a public library. They have a special library audience.
Okay. Of course, yeah. And I'm sorry if I don't know all of your different sort of positions in this, and I just put you into this big box of a public library. Yeah, university library, obviously. Yeah, that makes sense. But then again, that's also university libraries could also be you know, if you can get your knowledge, I guess people are also using Google and other places to get knowledge, and not just the library. And the more information that is coming to be possible to gain throughout other channels, then you would not have to use the university library. But that's just a guess. I don't know if you have the same sort of. But the interesting part is that, you know, loyalty, especially with the younger generations, is really fading away because there is a much higher demand for flexibility and services that fits you. You know, what I need right now, I need it like this, and then you'll get it. So in that sense, the value chain is being democratized because it's giving power to the users and saying, I want this. If you can't give it to me, I'll find it somewhere else. But it's a constant sort of figuring out where you are in this matrix. So it has to be easier, more simple and customized, you know, and we can really see that when we're doing market research or other people are doing Salesforce. I know that's more commercial, but customers or consumers, they expect companies to understand their needs and expectations, and they want to be treated as a person. You know, they want to be treated as, you know, when they interact, they don't want to just be another one in line. They really want to be seen and understood and get the service that they need. And then also in this sort of process, new needs have arisen, right? So we're starting to see this sort of move towards some new, very basic needs that need to be covered before moving into the next, and that's battery life and Wi-Fi. So this is obviously Maslow's pyramid of needs. So it's interesting to see how our world is changing and being more and more digital, and we cannot live without our phones anymore. So that's an interesting move from, let's say, 15, 20 years ago. So this digitalization, together with the liquid consumer expectations, is really moving forward. And while we were during, you know, the pandemic, McKinsey had said that we forwarded, you know, 10 years in digitalization when we shut down, when we did the when Corona and the pandemic hit. And our expectations are constantly being pushed. The better service we get one place, the better service we demand another place. So I don't know, do you have Uber in Canada, or do you have something similar? Yeah. So once you tried that, you expect that everything else is as seamless and easy as that. And that is also expected at the library, I would say. So there are some new expectations that you really need to look into. So this is sort of the overall thought on how we look at the future consumer and how we look at, you know, where we are heading towards. So now I'm going to dive into 5 trends, and feel free to ask during if you want something sort of more described. I think one of the most interesting things that are happening in the world of information and the world of knowledge is the creator economy. That we're really seeing that users are starting to create their own content. And I remember I used to have a magazine, like a printed magazine, and we had to ship that to the National Library in 2 editions. So, you know, because they wanted to keep track on that. And I have no idea how any library could ever keep track of all the content that is being created. And now, again, at Folkemødet, where I was last week, there was a panel of editors, chief editors of large media companies. One of the editors was an editor of a newsletter. I found that interesting because it's kind of a new dynamic that we're seeing, you know, that these old traditional media companies are put on the same level actually as a newsletter, because the newsletter, the sort of the power of the newsletter and the power of these this creator economy that you can actually gain a lot of money from by, for instance, this Substack. I don't know if you know it, but that's something that you can use when you have a newsletter. Then you can actually get a payment wall, so to say, by using various very simple solutions. So that is also being democratized in the way of using TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, Discord, all these new channels that are interesting to look into, because the flow of information goes in a different place than it used to when it was based on books or magazines or other printed things that are more easy to track. I just stumbled upon this. I don't know, is this something that is commonly known in the library world? book talk. I thought it was amazing. This whole thing of taking and gaining older, like older, I say, like a book, and then trying to see how can we actually promote reading books and talk about reading books in a new way. And these are not people from the library, people promoting books. They're just people who love books and like talking about this as well, and like finding new ways to discuss issues. And as far as I can tell, and now you might hear that I'm not an expert because this is something I stumbled upon for this particular presentation, but I really found it interesting how to reach new readers with TikTok. And as I mentioned before, TikTok is really growing a lot, and they just had over 1 billion users now, gaining 350,000 users each day. And it has doubled its, let's see, I'm pretty sure this is the next one. It has doubled its amount of baby boomers. So boomers are coming to TikTok as well. And we're really seeing a lot of companies, a lot of organizations taking this serious, because it has been sort of, oh, isn't that just a place to dance? But no, it's a really good place to communicate right now, and to sort of track your users and to be there for them and to communicate the knowledge and the possibilities of. Okay, so it's huge in North America. Thank you very much. And no need to talk more about that. Thank you, Laura. For me, it's interesting because I have not seen it before. I think the whole idea of power of curation is changing, right? Spotify is also moving away from being a music company to being a creator company, which is interesting to see, because what are they going to do now? They have also started with social audio. I don't know if you were on, was that big in Canada when Clubhouse came? Maybe somebody can say in the chat. Has anybody been on Clubhouse? I cannot see you. Do you know what Clubhouse is? If not, I will explain it. Then you can, okay, great. So Clubhouse was, it was an app that suddenly gained a lot of traction during the pandemic. It's an app where you were invited, so it was kind of a VIP exclusive thing. The idea was great because you go in there and then you have access to all the different rooms, and you can just enter any room you'd like. And then the room, and now I say room, it's audio only. So it's like an audio room. And then you could sort of enter, and then you could see the small avatar faces of the different people that were there and the name, but nothing else. And you could not communicate with text, only words. So you have to raise your hand, and then you could be invited up to speak, else you can just come in and listen in, and then you could leave quietly. This was like, you just left and nobody would sort of notice that much, which is a nice feature. But what I liked about it is that you suddenly go in and you have a conversation around things, and you can actually, a lot of book clubs were actually there discussing different books, arranged, let's talk about this book at that time. And then everybody was invited to join. So it was great, but what was missing, because it was evaluated for $4 million, right? So it was really huge at the time. But what they were missing was curation. Like, how could I find the things that I like? What is interesting? What is not? The things that librarians are also doing. Curating the knowledge. And they never really found a good way to do that. But after that, all big tech companies like Spotify, like Snapchat, like Facebook, I think all the big tech companies have made their own social audio rooms. LinkedIn is starting as well to do that a lot, where you can join rooms like Twitter Spaces. Exactly, Twitter has it as well. So those things are gaining traction as well. Clubhouse was the main driver of that. I think maybe Twitter Spaces were there before, not really sure. But anyway, the whole drive came from Clubhouse. And it was quite interesting. Anyway, giving out possibility for users to come in and create their own company, create their own rooms, create their own content, and doing things there. But another thing I think with this curation that's interesting with the algorithms that are controlling these digital spaces is how it will affect the content. There is a term called Spotify core. I don't know if you heard this before, but the Spotify core is the definition of music that has been sort of Spotified, because it has been made so that it will jump right into the algorithm of Spotify. So Spotify has they have these playlists, and if you are on those playlists, then you get a lot of listeners. And I have a friend who's a musician. So when you are trying to get content out on the internet. You use an algorithm like a search engine optimization, SEO kind of thing. You put that in and you try to make sure that the algorithms will get your content and place it high in Google or place it high wherever. You can do the same with music. So you can actually adapt the music to fit into the algorithm. So he made a number, and then he hired this kind of Spotify wizard to adapt it. So what happens? You get a certain kind of sound, you get a certain kind of content by these algorithms that are controlling how the content is being made. I think this is an interesting perspective on where we are moving as society, if everything has to sort of be adjusted into these algorithms that fit a certain purpose. Also, another thing that happens when we have this and when we're talking about algorithms is automation and AI. Because this is something that I really think is going to affect the way that we write, the way that we do things. This here on the right side that you can see the little video is somebody called Media Catch. So they're a media analyze company that can take live recognition of brands or faces or texts or everything, and then they can sort of give you an analysis of that from television, from radio, from social media, and give you an idea of how your brand is doing or whatever you want to know. What is the how many women and how many men are there? They can just give you a lot of data like that, real time, because it's facial recognition tools. I find that really interesting for analysis and also for clustering and finding content. It'll be easier to find content if you can just write it into a computer, and instead of asking a librarian, you will ask this, where can I find these two words put together in a video recording within this this place and time on these kind of media. There's super interesting perspectives on that, and that affects the whole ecosystem in many different ways. I don't know if any of you have Quillbot. Is that also huge in North America? Quillbot. If you do not know it, that you should definitely try it out. It's a Quillbot. So this is it's a automated text generator built on top of the GPT-3, the open AI models that are content generators, right? So you type in, for instance, a sentence, it's too long, and then you want it shorter because it has to fit a specific length. And then you just put it in and say shorter, poof, and it makes it. You say you want it formal, boom, it makes it. I use it for a lot of things. It's amazing, especially if you're struggling with a little sentence and you think, oh, I'm Danish, right? So I'm not native English, and you might notice that. So when I struggle with a sentence, I just sort of place it there and say formal, and then it comes with different, suggestions. So this is really a good tool, but it's also sort of shaping my language. So it's kind of this whole idea again of where is it pushing at, it's super cool. And it's not in Danish yet. And I'm like, we need this in Danish. But it is interesting because it's not something that I'm writing, but it is me writing it because I sort of let get the help from the computer. Another thing that is from this GPT-3, and I'm not going to go into the technology of this, but this is a really interesting neural network. I will give you the pleasure of seeing a video instead that describes it a little bit.
Have you ever seen a polar bear playing bass? Or a robot painted like a Picasso? Didn't think so. DALL-E 2 is a new AI system from OpenAI that can take simple text descriptions like a koala dunking a basketball and turn them into photorealistic images that have never existed before. DALL-E 2 can also realistically edit and retouch photos. Based on a simple natural language description, it can fill in or replace part of an image with AI-generated imagery that blends seamlessly with the original. It's called in-painting. In January 2021, OpenAI introduced DALL-E, a system that could generate images from text, like this avocado armchair. DALL-E 2 takes the technology even further with higher resolution, greater comprehension, and new capabilities, like in-painting. It can even start with an image as an input and create variations with different angles and styles. DALL-E was created by training a neural network on images and their text descriptions. Through deep learning, it not only understands individual objects, like koala bears and motorcycles, but learns from relationships between objects. And when you ask DALL-E for an image of a koala bear riding a motorcycle, it knows how to create that or anything else with a relationship to another object or action. The DALL-E research has 3 main outcomes. First, it can help people express themselves visually in ways they may not have been able to before. Second, an AI-generated image can tell us a lot about whether the system understands us or is just repeating what it's been taught. Third, DALL-E helps humans understand how AI systems see and understand our world. This is a critical part of developing AI that's useful and safe. The technology is constantly evolving, and DALL-E 2 has limitations. If it's taught with images that are incorrectly labeled, like a plane labeled car, and a user tries to generate a car, DALL-E may create a plane. It's like talking to a person who learned the wrong word for something. DALL-E can also be limited by gaps in its training. If you type baboon and DALL-E has learned what a baboon is through images and accurate labels, it will generate a lot of great baboons. But if you type howler monkey and it hasn't learned what a howler monkey is, DALL-E will give you its best idea of what it thinks it could be, like a howling monkey. What's exciting about the approach used to train DALL-E is that it can take what it learned from a variety of other labeled images and then apply it to a new image. Given a picture of a monkey, DALL-E can infer what it would look like doing something it's never done before, like paying its taxes while wearing a funny hat. DALL-E is an example of how imaginative humans and clever systems can work together to make new things, amplifying our creative potential.
I really, for me, this is something that is totally game-changing with this whole way of expressing yourself. But there's also, as they're not really touching that much upon it, but the whole bias situation. If you would write, give me a CEO riding a bike, what do you think will come? Probably a white male in his 50s, right? And the bike will probably be, I don't know, a Western bike. I don't know if there's a difference, but it definitely has a lot of bias. And that is one of the largest issues when it comes to using AI and putting it into this kind of systematic way. But again, it also gives an amazing way to express yourself. I would have loved to have tools like this. You know, you don't have to know how to paint or know how to do things. I saw a video somebody did on a Nina Simone song, and then they just type in the lyrics of the song, and then they write like if it should be in a classical painting, or if it should be a sketch, or it should be a realistic photo, and then it just creates like a little music video from the inputs. So this is not public yet. You have to apply to play around with DALL-E. I think there are a lot of restrictions to it as well right now, because imagine when you're taking deepfake and putting it into this machine as well. If you take, let's say, a picture of somebody and try to manipulate that. There are a lot of regulatory, ethical things that needs to be discussed, but it is an interesting road that we're taking right now. Sorry. Another thing with AI and automation is a project here in Denmark, actually. There is a project called Edison. So this project is trying to take 3,000 best-selling novels, putting it into an AI machine learning and figuring out how it can actually review book manuscripts that come in and then nominate the potential best-selling candidates. So it's like sort of taking the first step of you know, the editor's role, because no editor has ever got the time to read all these books that are coming in. So if you just take them in, let them go through Edison, it will give you feedback, and then you as a human, because I do believe that there will always be a human somewhere in all these spaces, can then take it to the next step and say, do I really believe what this AI has told me? So the problem could be that you start relying too much on the AI and getting too lazy as a person, kind of the laziness we have seen in WALL-E. If you have seen that movie, amazing movie regarding the future that we do not want. Again, if everything is so frictionless, then you start being lazy, right? But it's interesting to see, you know, how will this actually help people in understanding, you know, what are the actual factors that makes a good book? I mean, that I guess there are a lot of research on that, and they're trying to put that into the application to see whether it develops, and the readability, the interaction between the characters, the tension curve. It really takes a lot of these things along with it. So this is not being published yet, but it's still being done. I do believe that it comes in around a year or two. So it could be interesting to see how that will actually be. You can see there's a comment. Yeah, there is definitely bias in Edison too, and they're very aware of it. So it's kind of, it's a research project, but also something that is trying to test, how could this be used in the future? But yeah, how do you choose 3,000 books? So they got actually, and now that's a new thing. I heard that they got, I think, 9,000 more. They're trying to gain. It has been an issue to get enough sort of books to use with the collaborators that they had. But I think they have some more, and they're trying to get a more bigger variety. But I guess there are some things that make a bestseller. You would know better than me. This is not my field of work. But if algorithms are taking over some of the role of both content producers and curators of information, how will this impact our society? And how will this impact the work that you're doing and the way that you have to work with information? I think it's all about trying to see the user in the center. So instead of trying to protect our own professions or whatever, we have to see what is best for the user and how can we actually use algorithms as some sort of nutrition. I don't know if you've seen this. This is this app on the right side here. That's an app that you can take a picture of your plant and then it will help you give it the best nutrition. That could be great, right? If we could do that on people, making them grow, making them clever, making them happy, figuring out how can we give you your needs. I think that could be an interesting way if we could actually use AI and automation and algorithms for that. But that definitely means that we really, really have to figure out what we're doing and not doing it the wrong way. Another thing I'm going to touch upon is synthetic media. So I don't know, do you have any synthetic influencers, like virtual influencers in Canada yet? We do not have in Denmark anyway, but there are, especially in Asia, are being created a lot. This girl on the right side, she's called Michaela, and she's virtual, so she's synthetic. She doesn't exist, but she has a human boyfriend, and she just broke up with him. So it's like a huge story. It's a huge story, right? She has 3 million followers on Instagram. The other one on the left, she's called Emma Graham, and she's actually a huge sort of influencer that IKEA has been using. I also think Hugo Boss. So a lot of the big brands are starting to use her. One of the things that Emma Graham was doing as an influencer was that she was put up on a 24/7 sort of big screen in somewhere in Asia, probably Tokyo, or I don't know, where she was living 24/7 in her house. So you could see her, and it was like you could actually see her in her house, but she wasn't there. It was just, a screen showing her in this very, as you can see, realistic surroundings. It's very well produced, and you cannot really tell the difference from real and not real. We also see, of course, sort of AI being put together with synthetic media. I don't know if you know her, but Replica, she can be the future of librarians because she can help you with everything, and she can be your friend, and she can guide you, and you can ask her everything. And every time you want to unlock a new feature, obviously it costs. People have asked if they can marry her. People are considering her or him, because it can also be a he, to be their best friends, and they get to know you slowly. So they're asking in, have you went to yoga today, or did you talk to your mom today? So she's learning how your life is, and then trying to communicate with you and interact with you. So this is an app that you can just download, and you can test it out yourself and see how it works. But once you take it the next step, like want to try a feature, you have to pay. I think there are a lot of interesting, I guess, scary implications in this, but also something, as a chatbot, I mean, they get, the first level of interaction, that you can have might be with this kind of virtual influencer. And I think we should both look at the, dystopian and the utopian, and then the middle, what can it actually be used for? Where can this actually be good? Where can this actually help people that might be too afraid to talk to physical people and to begin with, and then they can help them in order to be better in communicating and getting their self-conscious, what is that called? The self-esteem a little bit better, maybe it could be good in some ways. So this is interesting as well. But obviously, all these things are also removing some jobs as we see them. A couple of days ago, it's actually a month ago, I think I took the screen dump, but Access, they have launched a campaign against AI because they take away their jobs. Because if you can do an AI doing speak right now, right, and you can do that, then a kind of what can you say, if all normal non-famous voices, they start not to matter because you can create them synthetically. And also some of these actors from this particular case here in UK, where they did a survey on 430 of its members, and 93% of their audio artists, they feel that AI posed a threat to them, right? So you know, they probably just have to find a new job, because the thing is, this is not going to stop, right? Unless there is regulation saying that we need humans to talk. But why do we need humans to talk? You know, why do we need a human like voice actor? And I also think once that we get this better and better, all the, you know, the old famous actors, they will be relived again, as we also have seen in some movies where we get some old characters staring again, you know, staring the movies. And again, with the voice, these voice actors, they can just say a little bit, like be in a session for a couple of hours, and then you can actually make a synthetic voice from that, and then you don't need them anymore. So this is interesting. One of the people that we're working with, called Mind Futures here in Denmark, they have tried. They're trying to push the 8th SDG, the 8th goal, sustainability goal, and that's life with artificials. We have to figure out how is life going to be with that, because there isn't really, you know, there isn't really that many big sustainability goals taking care of how can we actually use artificials in a good way for society, and what do we have to be aware of. So moving on, just tell me if I should start wrapping things faster. The metaverse, obviously. How many here has heard about the metaverse? Okay, I don't know if I can say, like, did you hear about the metaverse? I didn't do a Slido on that, but it is a common word in Canada, right? Yes, yes, yes. I consider Jen to be the answer of all of you. What I sometimes think, yeah, something you've heard of, right? And I think probably the most words that you would put it to is like gaming, Fortnite, concerts in Fortnite, VR glasses, Meta, Facebook, right? These kind of things. But what I think is interesting to look at is actually also all this augmented reality and these extra virtual layers that are coming, because it's this convergence between our physical and virtual lives, where all the information that we have can be put into life. So also the first video that I showed before we started, right? Suddenly all knowledge comes to life. And this is one of my favorite, by the way, things that you can see how what your co-worker's name is, and you know, maybe if they have a birthday, or is there something you have to mention that you might have forgotten. Again, seamless, you know, you don't have to care anymore because somebody will help you. But it's interesting, you know, it has some good things and some maybe a little bit complex things in order of where we're moving as society. But imagine you're going climbing, right? And then a whole new world comes around you. I row in a water rower, and I wear VR glasses, and then I can like row through a forest. The beautiful forest sounds. It's amazing. It's really, I really love it. You know, it gets really hot in there, but but I can see the potential, right? And I think that's what we have to see. Here you can see one of my favorite things with this, and that's actually kind of diminished reality, turning it off, you know, removing things, making things less complex. So I think that's really interesting. And then of course, this to the right is a library. I don't know if you know it, the virtual library in Second Life. That you can see where they have created a library, and that was one of the first sort of virtual worlds moving there, like moving where we took the library and put it into the virtual worlds in Second Life. On the left side, you see an NFT. Yeah, it is actually funny that you ask. Second Life is actually still a thing. I wasn't really aware of that, right? But it's one of the worlds, at least, you know, not a very popular one, but it's one of the worlds. And many of the other worlds, Decentraland and Sandbox and all these worlds, they look similar to a Second Life. They look as shitty, and it's a shitty experience to move into them, but they have an interesting potential. The thing here on the left here is an NFT. Do you know the term NFT? Have you heard about that? Maybe that's a bit... Yeah, exactly. Non-fungible token. Yes. Yeah. So it's a non-fungible. Yeah. So it's starting to be something that people know about. It's a non-fungible token. It's kind of like a crypto coin, but it's sort of a very unique code that is being attached to a digital project and product, and then you can sort of just, you own it. It's yours. It's on a blockchain. You cannot remove it. It's a very unique identification. And yeah, there is a new book also that you told me about, Jocelyn. So I think this is interesting to see, because all of these things are kind of part of the movement towards this convergence of our physical and virtual lives. And it's an evolution, it's not a revolution. It's going to take time. So when you say you were there like in the 2000s, right? When Second Life was there, all of this was part of a move towards this sort of merge of our lives. So this is a very quick sort of look through of how the internet is sort of evolving. And this is just part of this, evolving from taking when you had the computer in the basement, suddenly it came up on the table, then you had it in your hand, and now it's just going to be more sort of around you and surrounding the way we are. Some people also call it the internet of place or spatial internet. It's definitely moving away from just being internet of data to connecting people to be internet of things, and then getting there, slowly, very slowly. And still, as you can see, we have come a long way since the Morton Heilig's Sensorama machine in the 50s. Where you could actually experience sort of a 3D experience in this monstrosity of a Sensorama machine. I think some of the interesting perspectives is to discuss, and I think I just shortly mentioned that to begin with, right? How do we value our physical and virtual reality? I love this drawing, because it's not really there, it's not physical. And I think we as what can you say, the older generation, sometimes have a difficulty in understanding that actually this is a complete wrong drawing. It's more like this, the kids, they get it, they get it already, or somehow, they have different perspective on it. For them, the things that they experience in the virtual worlds are just different things, but they have the equal value, and sometimes even more. A lot of kids, they want more robot, what is it called? The Roblox, in Roblox, instead of getting a physical present. And I believe that now I've been in VR quite some time now doing meetings. I want to represent myself as well. I want to have my own identity with me, and I'm willing to pay for that. So we're going to see this move towards this avatar. Meta, they just launched a couple of days ago a new platform where they're selling clothes for their avatars. So this is interesting to see the valuation of that, right? And of course, children are likely to spend a lot of time in there. This is really this is a report I'm going to recommend you. It's called Safeguarding the Metaverse. It's a UK institute. It's called the Institution of Engineering and Technology. And they made this report, and it's for free, and it's able to download. You can just Google it. And it has a lot of really nice perspectives on how to take care of people. And I think that could be part of the library role, right? To take care of people in this transformation. But then again, we have to remember that a lot of the young ones feel more like themselves when they are in, the metaverse, even though the metaverse is not here yet, but this move towards the metaverse. So this is it's not really a scientific survey, but it's a small survey that Vice Media and Razorfish did with 3,000 gamers. And of the Gen Z of these gamers, more felt like they could be completely themselves in these worlds than they can in real life. And I think this is an interesting perspective. So the literacy has changed, right? Media literacy or information literacy is a different thing. I saw this talk by, and probably you know her, I don't know if she's a famous person in the library or if she's like a persona non grata. Well, anyway, she was she's the director of the community virtual library. So they were doing one in Second Life, right? And she has a small half-hour talk on her perspectives on it. And it's quite interesting. And I can see I misspelled library. So there you go. That went a little bit fast. But I would recommend you to watch that online, and I will share the slides with you if you want, or at least you'll have it also as a recording, but you can check out the QR code or find it on YouTube, right? So I'm quickly going to go through this because it's not really that important, but just to know that the metaverse is much more than AI or VR. It's like the whole immersiveness of how we gain information, and it takes information and getting it up to be spatial, getting up to be visual, in a new way. And next step, of course, is a brain-machine interface, which is being worked on right now from Elon Musk, for instance. And I think this is not something that we will discuss today, but if we look into the future, this is definitely something that we will have to be very aware of. We made a few reports on this, and you're more than welcome to download it. We have a white paper on different scenarios for the metaverse where you can look into if you're interested in going in that direction. And then again, the future is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. I love that quote from William Gibson. And it's very, it's especially with the, especially within the world of the metaverse, this is really true. Because we are seeing a lot of places where we have already built these virtual worlds, and imagining if you want to reach to young people, building a huge library in Roblox where you can do stuff and people can be part of building it and gaining an interest for books, doing book discussions inside these virtual worlds, workshops and conferences and new media formats and tours and new immersive experiences. There are lots of things being done, but of course, buy and build with caution. It's extremely expensive right now. Nobody knows if it's there in 2 years. It's kind of Second Life-ish, right? VHS, Betamax situation. Which one is it going to be? Nobody knows. So I wouldn't recommend to go all in just yet. This here is just an interesting thing that I saw, that books actually doing this, that you can put in a code and then you can actually see a plan, or you can see how this works. An amazing way to illustrate things. So this is a book you have, and you put your whatever augmented sort of screen you have, whether it's a telephone or it's whether it's a smartphone or it's like spectacles or other augmented glasses, you will be able to get more sort of a more feeling of what it actually is. And I love that. I think it's an interesting way to, to interact with the old book format and put in some of the new book formats. Also, this whole ownership that I talked about, the NFTs, Time Magazine has done a really interesting thing. They have actually earned $10 million selling 20,000 NFTs that are different kind of art pieces they have done together. And those NFTs, they give access to reading the magazine and to special events and to, merch and being part of things. So it's kind of a utility, it's not just a flat thing you buy, but you're getting to be a member of a club, sort of you get to be part of something. And it's the whole idea with the metaverse and NFTs is very much about identity and being part of something and community. And I think it has a very interesting drive there. We also see that, for instance, with some of the biggest, this is in Danish, sorry about that, Gary Vee, an American, he sold 1 million books in 24/7, like 24 hours, 1 million physical books in 24 hours. So my husband bought one. Why? Because it was Gary Vee, who's one of the biggest sort of NFT stars. And he thought, he'd like to see, well, because of research, obviously, but it's also interesting to see why would 1 million people buy that book. There was a really, it was a paperback kind of really, I have no idea what the book was about. We don't know if we should even keep the book because, it's impressive that he can sell 1 million books, right? And it gave access to being able to buy something. If you bought 30 books, you would gain access to buy another NFT, which was very, very valuable. But the whole idea that the book became irrelevant. So the book was sort of a thing that needed to be sent. Nobody wanted to read it. You had to ship it worldwide, 1 million books, to readers who don't want to read it. It's kind of I don't know, it's interesting, impressive, but we have to figure out how we use this in the right way, right? But it's very interesting to sell 1 million books in 24 hours. Also, we see these DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations arising that are self-organized communities constructed on these blockchains. And we see, it's a very interesting, I'm not going to go into it but you will know more about this because it's starting to pop up in many different ways. People organizing themselves in these communities that are based on a blockchain. So there is no sort of leader in that sense. It's kind of a very decentralized way of organizing. So you will hear more about that. And then, of course, we have a lot of questions that we need to ask ourselves. What are the roles? How will it be regulated? How will it affect our society? To what degree will we own the content that we create? How will it affect the whole system? Will we be anonymous? Pseudonymous or open to the public, our identities? So those are some of the questions that we look into a lot. And then before we do this, right, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the future of choice, maybe, and the future of trust. Because how do we actually, who will we sort of trust in the future? How will we make our own decisions when everything is fueled by data? When there is this massive demand for curation, but who will be the ones that are picking that out? And if you have these hyper-personalized assistants like Replica, you know, how do we make sure that we get some algorithms that actually see you and are actually good for you and are not just a TikTok, you know, deroute down one rabbit hole? How can we put in the trust in these blockchains and somehow and see if we can get it into the right direction? So this is something that we are trying to work a little bit, and we did a report on this to shift trust from individuals and systems, sorry, that's libraries, and then put it into the software protocols and see if we can actually start regaining some kind of trust in that new crazy way of doing these things. And we know from some of the surveys that we did that people hate algorithms. There is people don't like this. There is when you ask people, they're like, oh, you know, but when they actually act, you know, when they do things, when they choose what apps to download and what to do, you know, they use them, and it's the direction that society is heading right now. So we need to think about ethics. We need to think about how we do this. And I'm just going to show you this because it's a really nice thing with owning your own data. And then I'm done.
The next sale is a digital treasure trove charming Ellie's private data.
What?
Lot number one, her emails. The one she's opened and read, wonderfully personal. Let's start at 240, 260, 280. Sold. Lot number two, Ellie's drugstore purchases. Voila, priceless data. Do I hear 48? 500. Sold. Her location data. It's not creepy, it's commerce. Do I hear 600, 620, 640, 660? Sold.
Lala?
All her contracts, even sweet Nana. Sold at 740. Her recent transactions, her browsing history, her late-night texting habit. Sold. And now the one you've all been waiting for, and I can promise you won't be disappointed.
And I think, you know, I think we are going to see a move towards this, because in the future, everyone wants to be anonymous for 15 minutes. And maybe this is one of the roles that libraries can play, that you can actually come there, not being met by an assistant, like a virtual assistant that knows all your browsing history, but actually be met, you know, by a person who will just look at you of what you are right now and be there where you are right now. And maybe we will see a huge demand for that in the future. So that is all for me. I hope that you enjoyed it, and that you might have some questions that we can discuss.
Thanks very much, Sofie. If anybody wants to ask a question in the chat, I would be happy to read it. Or if you want to maybe raise your hand in Zoom, that might be the easiest way to keep track of the questions. If people would like to turn their camera on and ask themselves, that is welcome as well. There's a few comments from people in the chat just saying thank you, and that was very interesting. And I agree. I feel like I need to go look up about 15 things now, because I'm not as well informed about this as I should be.
I think none of us are. I mean, this is what I do for a living, right? And it's still new things pop on all the time. And I think the interesting thing is to see the patterns of where it leads us as society, what role you should play. And you probably know the hype cycle, the Gartner's hype cycle, you know, so technology comes up and everybody's talking about it and it goes down, and some of it just dies, but some of it slowly moves our society in a new way. And I find that's the interesting path. And then, you know, every time there's one sort of push towards one side of this, then something else will go the other. You know, there are blocks and drivers for everything, right? So how do you position yourself as a library and make sure that you have, you know, you contain the, I don't know if you call contain, but keep the values that you have, and don't give up too fast on all this digitalization and that is happening. I think those are the questions that we have to ask ourselves, and also be very aware of the movement, because it's going fast, you know. And the worst thing that can happen is if you don't sort of follow along a little bit, because then you'll be irrelevant. And that's not what you want.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said at the end about the idea that maybe the role for libraries in the future could be providing anonymity. And I think we already do that a little bit to some extent. But it's interesting to sort of ask ourselves, like, how do we balance? We want to be part of trends and we want to be relevant to our users, but we also, that's sort of an opposite role, what you're describing. So it's interesting to think, you know, how could we be doing both of those things? Leah has a question. Go ahead, Leah.
Makes me think about outstanding presentation. Wow, thank you. And I feel a little bit older. But it makes me think about how our education institutions are preparing librarians coming into the future. You know, are they asking these questions, and are they keeping up with this pace?
It's a good question, and we work a lot with educational institutions because they ask the same question: are we up in pace? And obviously, educational institutions are so slow, just like governments, right? Or EU. You know, I work also with the EU Commission, and I'm also myself, as being a part of the media board, I'm part of this whole bureaucracy that is, and the world is just moving faster than most of these institutions are. And then if we see this, the great unbundling and the big map of the media landscape, who will the players be? You know, I did some scenarios with NRK, the big broadcasting, a big public broadcaster in Norway. And, you know, why shouldn't Google be the ones doing public service in the future? Why should Google be the library? You know, what holds the society back from choosing them because they are so good at what they do? And so how... These things are just, okay, so how do we prevent that from happening? Because is that the world that we want? And I think it's very, we have to take this seriously, the way that it's going, because users, as you saw, the liquid consumers, even though they say that they don't like algorithms, they do. And I guess I can look at the most of you and you feel the same as I do when I say, I know that I shouldn't, but I do. And I'm totally in Apple, I'm, you know, Google, I'm trying to use Brave as a browser, but yeah. Carla, you have a question?
I do, thank you. Or earlier on in the presentation, you had mentioned that the consumers are not loyal to brands. It's about how they behave, not who they are, which resonated to me. We've been hearing that over with public libraries anyway, saying, you know, motherhood and apple pie in public libraries are not a given, that we don't deserve anything just because of that we're a public library or a library institution. So if we are struggling to maintain Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z as library users, then how do we have to shift our library behavior in order to be their go-to place? If that makes any sense whatsoever.
It does. And it's the same. I mean, in most industries, it's the same question. And I work closely with the media industry, right? And that's the same. They're struggling with the same thing. We have these traditional medias, right? A lot of them are shutting down their print magazines and print, you know, one of the biggest sort of, what do you call that? Those tabloid newspapers are also closing the print now. We've been discussing this for 20 years, you know, so it's an evolution, not a revolution. It's something that's happening gradually. So how do you start making media for the young people who do not want to do the traditional? And how do you give your library expertise and make sure that people gain the knowledge? Like the quote that I had to begin with of what should Canadian libraries be? You know, how do you make sure that you are that for everybody? That is a huge question. What I think is that you have to think a little bit unbundling. Have to stop thinking you can bundle it in one thing and then figure out, okay, so we have to figure out the formats that these people are using. Let's say Roblox, TikTok, whatever. And then not trying to put the content that you have already into that format, but figuring out how can somebody help you to do this in a new way that's actually, so it's kind of native, or what do you say, that it fits to the audience. And that I think that right now is almost the hardest exercise. To adjust to that and figure out how to be where they are in a way where you don't sort of miss out on it, because it can quickly become very what do you call that, quirky? No, that's not a word, is it? But it doesn't, because the young people, they can figure it out if you try too hard, you know what I mean? So I guess that's kind of the tricky part here, in figuring out how to do that. And what we're trying to work with people regard this is figuring out how you can actually make innovation labs or do something where you take it out of context, because sometimes when it's within, especially a large legacy organizations, it's very difficult to do these things. And I'm not just saying let the young people do it themselves, because they're young, they don't know, necessarily, but at least involve them and go and listen to them and see how they're doing and see what their needs are, and then try to fulfill that instead of, yeah. And then of course, obviously still be something for the ones that you've always been something for. It would be sad if you like miss out on the older generation as well, right? Any other questions? Great, there's a friend of Peter Bishop, nice. Hey, thanks a lot. And Quillbot is on somebody's mind. I'm happy. Once I tried it first, I was also pretty excited. Again, it made my life easier. I don't want to end up, has anybody seen the WALL-E sort of a cartoon? Is it called cartoon? Animation, whatever, yeah. It's amazing. If we, we could end up being so extremely lazy, and then I guess maybe the role of the libraries should be to put in friction, but figure out a special kind of creative friction, or yeah, it's interesting to see, because I really believe we need more friction, even though I love it to get everything as quickly as I can, because then I can be so efficient. All right. I guess this is about the time that
yeah, I guess so. If there are no more questions, thank you so much, Sofie. That was really, really interesting. And I think you've given us a lot to think about. So thank you.
Thank you. And you're always welcome to link up on LinkedIn or send me any questions if you have any. I'll be happy to share my thoughts. And also I write a lot about these things on LinkedIn. So there you can also see some of the new things that are happening.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming, everyone.